Hi, my name is Retiming. Today we are looking at the slow motion capabilities of the iPhone and the amazing footage that you can get working at the 3 different speeds that the phone allows. Surprisingly, the iPhone has some of the best slow motion capabilities of most cameras under $5,000. It lets you shoot in 60p, 120p, and 240p. P sounds confusing, but it just is short for progressive because a long time ago, there used to be P and I interlaced. Now almost all footage is progressive, but the P helps distinguish between the shutter speed and the frame rate. To enable slow motion on your iPhone, and to set the different slow motion standards, you want to go into settings on your phone, scroll down to camera, and in record video, you have the option of 1080p at 30 frames per second, 1080p at 60 frames a second, and the same for 4K. 60 frames per second, if you just shoot and play back at that same speed, will give you that high frame rate sports look with no motion blur. But if you shoot at 60 frames per second and play back at 24 frames per second, like we're going to show you how to do in the latter part of this tutorial, you'll get approximately 2.5 times slow motion. This is all without actually using the slow motion tab in the camera of the phone. The slow motion tab is set with this next one, record slow-mo, and you have the option of 120 frames per second or 240 frames per second. You access the slow motion camera by scrolling one over to the left from the video camera. So what is each level of slow motion in the camera good for and how to get the most out of it? Well, 60p is great for adding a look of dreaminess to an otherwise normal clip. Slowed down to 24p, this gives a look of slow motion without stretching the action out too much. It's also great at covering up the handheld shake from holding the camera because at 60p slowed down, it's much less noticeable. You get much smoother looking handheld footage. In the true slow motion tab, 120 is great for stretching out a moment in time or even using it to analyze your golf or your tennis swing. It's probably best used for small snippets of around a second that you want to stretch out to 5 or 10 seconds. 240p is super slow motion. 1 second in this mode will take 10 seconds when played back normally. It's best used to look at something that the human eye doesn't normally capture, like the bursting of a balloon or the smashing of a piece of fruit. A common mistake is people shoot too slow for what the subject is. If you shoot someone walking down a flight of stairs in 240p, that 10-second walk is going to take a couple of minutes and it doesn't really make for captivating footage. It's best to stick with the appropriate level of slow motion for what you're shooting. A good rule of thumb is the slower you go, the more movement and action you need in the frame to keep it interesting as it's played back at a lower speed. That means moving the subject as well as the camera, and the slower you're shooting, the faster you need to do that. Water is a great slow motion subject because it's constantly moving and there's so much of it and it reacts in such a dynamic way. So is sand or glitter or leaves. Anything that's falling or exploding or moving with lots of little pieces looks great the slower you go. So if you wish to retime your clips, you'll have to do that in Premiere or the NLE of your choice. So we're going to import our footage. If we play it back, it just plays back in real time. All you have to do is right click, go down to Modify, Interpret Footage, and then instead of use the frame rate, assume this frame rate. And this can be whatever we want, say 24p. Now when we play this back, it'll be slow motion 2.5 times. If we then drag it into our timeline, and now we're free to find the part that we want, add an edit there, find the part that we end, edit there, and now we can play it back with the right speed. You don't need to do this for the 120 and 240p because the iPhone will output them and export them at the correct speed. That's our look at the slow motion capabilities of the iPhone and how to get the most out of each stage. My advice would be to experiment as much as possible. You may find that something that looks totally normal to the naked eye will look spectacular at slow motion. And since the camera is always in your pocket, you've got nothing to lose by experimenting. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.